I know many of you listening or watching to this podcast today care about life, care about human life. Many of you would describe yourselves as pro-life, and it's a very important discussion. But I'm very excited to have this guest today. Her name is Nicole, and she has not just a philosophical kind of view of pro-life, but has some very real and raw life experiences that she has to share for us today. So, Nicole, it's great to have you on. And why don't you tell the guest a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, my name is Nicole Smith, and I am married to a wonderful man and have two beautiful little girls. My career beyond motherhood, which is the most important career you could have, as I'm sure everybody else would agree, would also be on the communication sides of global human rights. So I've taken on many topics over the years, one of which being abortion, but also the cases of the child bride in Uganda, the sex slave of Afghanistan, the religious minority imprisoned in Iran, and really any continent that's occupied. I've probably dealt with some really tough choices and cultural realities, and advocated on the behalf of those that are hurting. So that's really my career background. But as you said, the birth of my second daughter would bring flesh and bone to my career, really make it all the more real and tangible because it became my everyday. So.
I'm actually going to throw a little bit of a curveball at you. I said we're going to jump into your daughter, which we will. But let me actually go the other way first.
Yeah, sure.
Where did the that desire of being in some pretty extreme situations, particularly globally, you're in religious persecution and in the Middle East over there. That doesn't scream a lot of little girls' favorite dreams when they grow up. So tell us just a little bit about that process of what led you there.
Yeah, actually, it's funny you say that because I've had that brought up quite a bit throughout my career. How do you handle such tough topics so often? But really, it originated. My parents were church planters as a child, and they dealt with a lot of at-risk youth. So they dealt with the church planting for youth ministries, and so I don't know. It's just like a family cultural reality that if someone was in need, you get up, you help, right? And so I just grew up that way. My brother and I were very oriented and wired that way because that's how we were raised. And as I got older, I actually my family's not really oriented this way, but more in the political spectrum. I became just really intrigued by politics very, very early in life, which my parents allowed me to foster in my own way. So as I got older, I decided that I wanted to go and get an undergraduate in political science, and then I pursued a master's in law and public policy. And so I was not really prepared for what God had in store with the use of that education. I had more of a mindset that I would go into constitutional law. And the irony of all ironies, one of my very first jobs out of my master's was at a constitutional law firm. But I was on the communication side. We called it the Court of Public Opinion. And they had an extensive network of affiliates on a global scale. So things that we did in the United States were oriented towards life and liberty issues. So that's a lot of where the abortion topic came in, though I did deal with it in Europe and that kind of stuff as well. That global aspect kind of came into play with those global affiliates. And so some of the biggest work that we did were mostly with religious minorities that were imprisoned in Iran, Sudan, Turkey, all sorts of different countries. That was very common for people to be thrown in prison for apostasy or a threat to national security. Iran would use that reasoning a lot. Well, if you go into Iran court systems, you're not going to expect that a Christian would get fair due process of law, right? So essentially what we would do is bring awareness to these cases globally. We would raise a bunch of petition signatures. One of our cases got over 1 million petition signatures. We present it to the political process. President Obama caught attention of it and put one of our clients on the Iranian deal. And he was released back to the United States. Another one out of Sudan, this poor woman was actually pregnant, had to be imprisoned with her young child because if she's a Christian, she can't be her children can't be raised by Christians. So they have to, children are actually imprisoned with their parents if they're, it's pretty messed up. But her case, Angelina Jolie ended up taking on to it. Also the Pope, she was eventually released and now lives in the United States. So again, those are sort of that path that I didn't really anticipate at the outset. I sort of got into this digital communication world that I wasn't actually trained for, but I was very intimately aware of the intricate knowledge of really the policy processes and that kind of stuff. So it actually gave me kind of a leg up in that world. And I saw great success, and success being that we saw great outcomes, like people were freed out of prison in Iran. It would take time, but some pressure and some good political maneuvering, we got into places and people were released. So it was pretty amazing. But I got that question quite often. I would go to these conferences and, you circle up and everybody's like, hey, what do you do for your company? What company do you work for? I'm like, I sell shoes and I sell coats and whatever. And like, what do you do? I'm like, I free religious minorities out of, like, why are you here? I was like, because people do need to be freed from these places. And these are the tools that we're able to use to really impact outcomes that are just unreachable, like really was just unreachable. The outcomes for these people would largely mean a death sentence. And I mean, literally, they would die because they're very short timetables for their release. Sometimes it's just like 6 to 8 months. Sometimes it'll be several years, but still they're in Iran, they hang you up on out for the public to see and literally execute you in those manners. So it's just really brutal.
Yeah. Which brutal is a good word there.
Yeah.
Very, very intense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you're I'm just trying to work on my own timeline here. When you were doing that, were you married and a mom at that point, or did that happen later?
Yeah, actually, so I was married in school. We actually got married. My husband's a civil engineer, so he took his time going through school. So so I was already married. I think I was about 3 years into my career. 4 years into my career, I ended up giving birth to my first child, and I really like to tell this story because motherhood really is just a very transformative experience. At least it was for me. I kind of look at it like entering the world of Oz. So it was in black and white, and then I enter into Technicolor. And I like the birth story that I have for my first daughter is just it taught me how strong women were. And I know not all women have to take this path, but I'm kind of one of those like, hey, go with the flow type girls. I was like, if I can do it without an epidural, I'm going to do it. Well, I had a 29-hour labor without any medication. And I pushed for 15 minutes. I burst almost every blood vessel in my face to give birth to a child. And then I'm walking up and walking around within minutes after giving birth. And for months and months after that, my husband kept going, you did that. That's amazing. I was like, I called it the birth high. He was just like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And I know after that point, I was just like, oh man, kind of bought into this cultural lie in a way, probably not on like a high level surface. My mom was a homemaker, and she made it a very prideful career endeavor to go in and be a homemaker. She always was very adamant that you called it homemaker. I'm not a stay-at-home mom. I'm not just a mom that stays home. Like, I have a career path that I've chosen. And but I was very different than my mom. Like personality wise, I knew that I wanted a bit of balance of home ownership in the sense of what I create in my home, but also work outside of the home and in my own capacity, in the own way, and own balance too. Like, because you can't have all things at once, right? So in those early years of my oldest daughter's life, like especially that first year, it was a very enriching experience. It was just beautiful. She was so sweet. She was just this beautiful little girl. And I'd gotten into an awareness of female strength that, I'd always try to unwittingly compare myself to men in some ways, because I did have this idea of wanting to go and work in a, non-traditional, I guess, role in some respects. And then it just gave me such a deep, abiding awareness of, oh my gosh, like I am incredible. I could do absolutely nothing else for the rest of my life. And I'm just amazing. I did that, And then I sustained that body, that baby, that body that I grew, and with my own body, like that just like blew my mind. So that first year was just like really just a beautiful experience. And so much so that we decided we wanted another little one about the time she was a year old. And that's when things in our story sort of try to shift, where I experienced something that's called secondary infertility. Didn't realize that was a thing, but I think it's like 20 or 30% of infertility are second or multiple childs. Usually you think it's like the first kid, you struggle. But a lot of stuff was going on with my body I didn't understand in the hormone space that gave me this physical ailment that would prevent me from conceiving a child. And so I went on this really intense journey of healing, because it actually put me in an immense, like mind-bending pain. I can't describe how painful it was. It was 24/7 for 3 years straight. I was just like, I kind of liken it to being doused with kerosene, and you just feel like you're on fire all the time. I've never been set on fire, but that's what I feel like it would be. And so I sort of went on this like journey of discovery of how to get this ailment gone, the inflammation in my body that was just constantly racking my immune system. So after 2 years, sort of transitioned into a new season, which is a season of miscarriages. Unfortunately, the inflammation was going away, which meant I would get pregnant, but then it was hormone responsive. So I get pregnant and it would respond and I would lose the baby. So for about a year, I started to go through an even more dark season than I ever imagined before. Here you want a baby. And then, oh man, my oldest, children are just so spiritually aware on a level. Here she is like 2-3 years old. And I'd be like laid out on the floor just sobbing because I'm of losing another child, and my 3 or 4 year old's like laying her hands on me, praying for healing and praying that, maybe God will let this baby stay with us instead of going with Jesus. And I'm just just absolute, just a beautiful, but it was a struggle too, because I felt this is another season that was hard to describe. It was almost like I was losing 2 children, because when I lose a baby, I was put into this really dark space that I was losing my baby in front of me, because I was losing the experiences with her where I was supposed to feel joy at all of her firsts. And I wasn't feeling any joy because I was just so racked with grief. And of course, my body is just tired and in pain all the time. So I got a lot of people tell me all the time that, like, well, you're great. You should be grateful you have a child. And I said, but I don't think you understand what the implications of what's happening, because you can't, and I don't know if you have children, but do you have children?
I've got 2 little ones, and I got one on the way. So yeah,
Oh,
I've got my little ones.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. So, probably observed with your wife or even for yourself, this, when you want a kid, you just really want a kid. It's like this like switch that goes off. It's wild. So, it was just this deep, dark cycle of about 3 years when the ailment was I'm finally finding the solutions. That was great that I get pregnant with my youngest daughter, and she is a fighter. So we named her Cosette, and it has like kind of 2 meanings, victorious little one. I really enjoy meanings. I usually base it off of family names, but this one really stuck. And I was like, she's alive. She's here. She's growing when none of her siblings were able to, she's Victoria's little one. And so the pregnancy was okay, like wasn't terrible, but wasn't great. And that's really when we go into a new season too, that I don't know if I've like skipped ahead of your schedule, but we've arrived at my second daughter's birth.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, good. Yeah. So, this was COVID. Like she's a COVID baby. She was born in April 2020.
Oh, so
So
she's really a COVID baby.
she's like at the height of it. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So it was like, I don't know if anybody remembers this or if you do, if you experienced it, but, it was like literal, like parking garage gynecological exams. Like you had to go into parking garages to get your prenatal testing. Most everything was telehealth. It was awful. So unfortunately, I went into labor before, like, they didn't give me my 36-week like test and shots to make sure I didn't have an infection. They usually do because of COVID. They pushed everything back. Well, I went into labor 3 weeks early. So 27-hour labor. They didn't touch me but a few times. And as it turns out, I had what they call prolapse cord. And it's when the cord comes out in advance of the baby. That was discovered at 27 hours. And it was, you're just laboring. And again, I don't have an epidural. I didn't first time. I didn't do this time either. And you're just laboring and everything's fine. Actually, my husband had started to take a nap. And because it had been a while, I don't fault him for that. And the doctor finally comes in. It's like, hey, it's been a really long time, but it's looking like the baby might be in a little distress. I need to check you. So she checks me and prolapse cord. She yells out, like 20 medical professionals are in that room scrambling to get me covered up and rushed to the OR. I have no idea what a prolapse cord is. Like they're very rare. And my husband's like stands up all of a sudden. It's like, what's happening? Nobody comes to tell him what's happening really. Rush to the OR. I don't have an epidural, so I feel everything that they're doing, shoving the catheter in. The doctor's hand has to be still remain up there to keep the baby off the cord as long as possible. And I start to like couple tears roll down, and this sweet anesthesiologist like says, I know you're feeling a little overwhelmed right now, but we do this all the time. You're going to be okay. And I was like, but I'm not falling asleep. What are you going to do? Are you just going to rip her out of me while I'm awake? And she said, no, we're going to put you under general. And at that point I black out. And when I wake up, I have no baby. For hours, I have no baby. And I'm delusional. I have no idea where I'm at, because when you don't have an epidural, they do put you under general. And when you come out, you just feel everything because there's no epidural to sort of taper off and then pain medication to come into play. So they put me on a narcotic, but it never did anything. It just made me high as a kite. Honestly, I was just just out of my mind, delusional. And finally they bring her to me. And almost immediately we know something is wrong. She's acting erratic. She can't latch. Looks like she's having seizures, all this stuff. But it takes 4 days for them to formalize that there's something wrong. And they send us off into NICU. Again, height of COVID. So no family could be there. My husband couldn't be there. Here I had just had major surgery without any pain medication. And then when you're in upper NICU, the intensive NICU, they just give you a chair in the corner. And I couldn't put my feet up. There was no place. And at the end of the day, they get you in a raffle and you get to maybe stay in a separate room. And you go in from like 6 o'clock and you have to be out in the morning. And then right back to your chair again. And at night, just a massive box with a really thin mattress on it. That's what I slept on. And my body would go into shock. I would just shake uncontrollably from the pain, and up the next morning, right back out, because I had like memorized their shift changes so I could follow what was happening. Well, they never told me this, actually. 3 weeks later, during a shift change, I heard one of the nurses during a shift change say that she had been resuscitated at birth. They never formally told me that she was ever resuscitated. And the confirming was the insurance that said resuscitation of infant, $746. It was a line item. Yes. So we just, it was hard because, again, you're doing this by yourself, and you have a near 5-year-old at this point. They isolate you. It was indescribable experience. But I had this one really impactful conversation I had with my husband over the phone late night. He just didn't want to get off the phone with me. You got to understand, my husband's very introverted and quiet. Talking is not really his jam. So I'm like, I just want to get off the phone. I want to go to sleep, And he goes, Nikki, this is it. Like, our daughter, she is our mission. She's giving life and breath to the identity that we have in Christ, the identity we have as image bearer. It doesn't matter her outcome. She is important. She is precious. She is ours. And she's who we prayed for. It's who God gave us. And it would be 6 months when she would receive the formal diagnosis of cerebral palsy, which is essentially brain damage. And the way every case of cerebral palsy is different, because the damage done to the brain is a unique brain done. The damage is done to a unique brain. So everyone is just like, our idea as CP is always they're bedridden, they're in a wheelchair the rest of their life, they can't speak, they can't do a lot of stuff. And early on, you don't know, like, they just have guesses, educated guesses. And she had to get a gastric tube because she was unable to feed. She is 3.5. She is free of that gastric tube. She can now eat. She cannot speak. She cannot walk. But she will. She will one day. It's a matter of when, not if, And so the prognosis that she had at the early outset, never eat, never walk, never talk, she will be a victorious little one. She's just chipping away at every little one. And so I remember in NICU standing over her and going, God, now I know why you gave her that name. And I insisted that everyone call her by her full name, because her nickname is Etty, but we call her Cosette because I wanted even a doctor that didn't believe in God, that every time that they uttered her name, they were speaking a blessing of victory over her every single time. And so through prayer, she will have victory. It's not a matter of if, it's when. So that's where things sort of have given a deeper meaning to my mission. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That so many winding roads, ups and downs throughout the precursor, the buildup of trying to get pregnant, to having pregnancy, and then obviously the birth itself, and then afterwards, already proving so many people wrong.
Amen.
And what an incredible story of perseverance, of strength. That kind of goes back to what you're talking about before. I see this a lot with women. That yeah, well, I'm just a mom, or just this, just that, and I look at my wife. like I said, my wife's pregnant right now, and her pregnancies, um, she is a blessed soul. She is sick like the entire 9 months,
Oh my gosh,
of
bless her heart.
all 3, and all 3, the babies are due in the summer, so she's throwing
Hot.
up while it's 100 degrees, like, but
Oh
then
no.
that baby's born and she feels great. But what an incredible thing. There's nothing more like, for those of you that are listening, if you're not a parent and, like, you've not experienced that, there literally is nothing like it in the world
No,
of
it isn't. Mm-mm.
it. It's incredible, like, absolutely incredible that that is your child that came out of, in your case, out of your body, if you're the husband, out of your wife's body. It's amazing, and for our culture to really downgrade that,
Oh, I
um,
know.
is awful.
It's a great disservice to women, honestly. And I think it started off really in a quiet manner, right?
Mm,
We're wanting the suffragettes didn't downgrade their womanhood in order to obtain what they should be, which is equal footing within society to be able to vote, right? And then, you know, we've moved so much that this idea of equal footing within equal access and equal outcome,
mm,
um, that it slowly just eats away at the reality, the truth that, we're seeking out this male view of the bombastic strength, which is beautiful.
mm,
Like, don't get me wrong, men are just, the way that God makes you to be strong and powerful and to protect is something of its own
mhm,
brand of beauty, and that should be celebrated. But in an attempt to get these little gains, what they saw as gains, they whittled away the reality of women's strength. And it is a great disservice. I don't think I fully bought into it, but really at the surface, under the surface, I feel like I did until I had kids, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is
mm,
just amazing. And everybody has different experiences, I understand. Um, but it just, when you really think about the fact you grew a person, like,
yeah.
and when you equate, like, especially when you're saying your wife is sick, but they equate like the energy outputs required at different stages in gestational development. It's insane that women are still upright, still walking around, still taking care of other
Mhm.
children, still doing jobs. Like, I mean, I know my husband when he has a cold, and he's definitely not up.
Yeah, yeah.
and that's actually, I mean, we make fun of it so much in society, but it's true. That's actually female strength exemplified. Like, we can endure intense amount of internal pain and still continue to push, because we can deliver human life through our body. And I know what most women are like, I can't do that. No, you can. You just don't want to, because you have an epidural. It's a wonderful option. Don't get me wrong. But you can actually do that. That's what you're designed to do. And so when we have these moments of resilience that are transcend what men are like, how do you do that? It's because of that, And I think we've sort of forgotten, because we don't really think of it in that way. That this is us being strong and
Mhm.
powerful.
Yeah, absolutely, and that
Hmm.
I like the way you put that of, um, men, and obviously we're talking in
In
generalities
general,
of
so.
everybody, but,
Hmm.
um, yeah, that strength. I'll speak for on my behalf. I've always been a pretty happy-go-lucky. Like, I've never been in a fist fight. So, like, that side of, like, physical strength of having to bash heads in or whatever has never been my big thing.
Yeah.
But I don't remember this specific moment, but I remember when I was dating my wife, and I don't think we were even engaged at that point, that I'm thinking of. But these thoughts of, like, "Hey, if somebody looks at her the wrong way, I'm gonna do something." It was just this inner thing, this inner
Yeah.
protection that
Protector. Yeah.
I
Protector.
I hadn't felt like, I had protection for, like, my sister and for my
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
nieces, but not this intensity, and that like you said, that's beautiful on its own right.
Hmm.
But yeah, nobody that knows my wife and has known the difficulties of pregnancies that she's gone through, and she stays at home with our kiddos, and
Hmm.
raises them. Nobody can say that she's weak because she's sick. Like, no,
Yeah,
she's
no,
incredibly strong.
yeah,
Um, all this while raising a baby, which is, for all we know for now, has been super duper healthy. And we're really grateful for that. But yeah, that is strength is the right word. Just because she can't lift as much weight as I can does not mean that she's not strong. She
yeah. And I think
absolutely
it's a
is.
limitation in term on the term. You know how like you look up a word in a dictionary and it has multi
Mhm,
levels of a definition. I think we very much limited the word of strength to something that is outward and
mhm,
bombastic. Um, and that's a cheapening of that word. There's more to that. And
uh,
again, too, like physical strength, but physical tied to an emotional strength that comes with that. I look back at the first birth I had. Of course, that was an amazing physical accomplishment. To look at my second, and it was an amazing physical accomplishment too in its own right, but the emotional toll and strength that I
mhm,
had to take. So, sort of my NICU experience was, I believe that the outward presentation is a reflection on the inward mentality. So I would get up every morning about 6 o'clock, and I would curl my hair and put my makeup on, and I'd put my clothes on, and I would open the curtains, and I was open for business the way I looked at it. Um,
mhm,
it was a really difficult time in which I had to push through emotionally on a level I didn't know I was capable of. And I had to keep doing that, and I still have to do that today because the reality is my daughter's not out of the woods, right? She still
mhm,
has many challenges that she has to endure, but this is built endurance in me,
mhm,
and to a level that I could not comprehend at the outset. And parenthood in general is that, right? It's every passing day, week, year is a different set of challenges that we have to figure out the solutions to, that build an endurance and awareness of our internal reality, that our own struggles, right? We're not perfect. Now my daughter's 8, and I'm like, okay, look, you're aware, mommy and daddy are not perfect. She's like, oh, I'm aware. Yeah, I know. So, but to, just surmount those ever increasing challenges that, when they're little, they have little problems. When they get big, they have big problems, right? So that God gives you that buildup of endurance through the years as those challenges change. And as a mother, I think that that's made me stronger in my career as well, because again, it gave that flesh and blood to when I was working with young child brides in Uganda. I didn't have the honor of holding her and telling her how important and precious and wonderful she was. I and I knew that behind her there will be hundreds of other little ones that will be put in the same circumstance than that she was, that I could buy back her diary and put her back into school, but the culture around her would perpetuate an idea that she wasn't as valuable as a man, and that
mhm,
wasn't okay with me. So probably getting back to the career part of how hard it was, is that I just couldn't settle for that anymore.
mhm,
That culture could perpetuate this reality, that as my daughters grow, in American culture is no different than Ugandan or Iranian or French or Armenian. They're all the same. They're all the same. And I know it looks different. Every culture perpetuates this idea that dignity can be measured. Someone can be devalued for another criteria or another, right? Culture perpetuates that idea. And it's has different products. American culture, abortion is one of those realities. Uh, Human trafficking, drug culture, porn culture, euthanasia. We have about what I believe, around 7 or 8 core industries that commoditize the human person in American culture. And we need to change the mindset around human value. We need to create a mindset within our culture that says, hey, you are the image bearer of the Heavenly Father. Heck, you don't even have to believe in God. Do you see that this is a person with a genetic DNA? And that alone is access to full equal rights of personhood. Because if you don't look at it as the genetic, genesis of the genetic human person, then you are making a philosophical allowance for the measurement of human value, because it says, like, hey, culture has the right to measure human value at any point in development, even if it is at 6 weeks, even if it is at 20 weeks, even if it is at 40 weeks. And I like to try to bring this in too, because it's more of the reality we were facing too, is that several state governments were presenting death by medical neglect up to 28 days after birth, around the same time that my daughter was born. That means that on the table, they could have told me, your daughter will have brain damage. Do not resuscitate, because her value, her quality of life she'll be fed by a G tube. She'll be whatever they say. And she's better off dead. And the people that said it wasn't a reality that we could enter from the point of the discussion around human value within the womb could ever exit out of the womb and be put into question, you need to look at California, Maryland, and Colorado. And some conversations I've had with parents, one out of Colorado in particular, their son had a very similar birth to Cosette. His was just a longer duration without oxygen, so a higher ischemic damage, brain damage. And they approached them and said, hey, why don't we just put them into extended care? Because when he's 30 something years old, you're still going to be wiping his rear end. So we'll just withhold all medical intervention and just let him die when he's just fine. So this is the reality that we're in, because we put into question any point in the gestational development, the value of human life was put into question, and will exit the womb. It already has exited the womb. And would you have people that without question say, yes, it is a right for a mom to just let her child die on the table. And that was a reality I could not handle either. Because that's the idea that my daughter is not as valuable as her sister. And that's not a world that I'm okay with. And we need a serious rework of our mindset around human value within culture. And a big thing, I've worked with the abortion discussion for well over a decade, because that was a lot of the topics I took on. I've seen every imaginable angle, from pro-life to pro-choice. There's really nothing new under the sun, unless it's just borderline psychotic, where nonsensical. And I always feel like the conversation starts about 2 to 3 steps too far down the conversation line. We need to bring it down foundationally. And it's very hard to refute the idea of human life holding intrinsic value when you place it at that level. Because, if you come in on that discussion where you're like, talk about any talking point in the abortion discussion, it's like, it's all the same. It really is. Where you just kind of put in tension the level of value of human possesses. Like the mom has a greater moral significance than that of the fetus, because of the fetus's point in development makes them more dependent upon. So if that's the philosophical argument you're looking at, you're on a sliding scale of value for your whole life, because when you exit the womb, you leave that child there, they're still in a total state of dependence. They need you for life, for breath, And honestly, you can argue all the way up through adolescence, just a sliding scale of moral value. And then once you hit this certain point, then if you get into an accident and you sustain any type of physical or mental impairment, then your measurable value, it decreases, because it's off this philosophical concept that it's physical dependence that is where you derive or lose your moral worth, So again, it's just this bringing it down another step and really seeing where those conversations lie. It's really hard to be like, hey, culture should have a right to measure human value. I'm like, well, what about like the Holocaust? Kind of what they did. Yeah, you don't support that. Okay, well, let's have that conversation around the philosophy of how they got there, because kind of jumping into that racial idea, we don't really talk about World War II in particular had multiple racial groups at play at that time, right? And so we think of it like the Nazis are looking at Jews as a racial inferiority, but they always forget to talk about the Japanese and the death of 20 million Chinese that were killed because of their racial inferiority. And we sort of, they've divided and, put us in these different camps, and forgetting the narrative that it's an impact on, it's a reality of the human condition to try to measure, right? We like to believe that we're better than someone else, or we're stronger because we feel weak. And, that's what Hitler played a part in. They felt weak from World War I, and he made them feel strong. He made them feel powerful. And when you feel powerful, you feel powerless, and you are made to feel powerful, you will always degrade someone else's value in that process to make yourself feel important. And if you make that allowance within culture at any level in development, you get this point in which they can say to my daughter, you're not worth living. Your value is not worth it because you're going to have disabilities.
I think what you're saying there, we're seeing similar discussions, and you mentioned this briefly on the opposite end, particularly into Canada of euthanasia, of
Oh, yes.
when's the right time to end life. And look, I'm pretty staunchly against the whole practice, so just doing this for kind of the devil's advocate. I think the intention is behind. Oh, grandma's been suffering. She's going to die next month anyway. So why not do the merciful thing and just let her go down easy? Like that's what's
But she's not a
played.
dog.
Exactly. That
But she's not a dog. So I liken
exactly.
this. Okay, say grandma did die, right? You're driving to the funeral, and you're greeted by the groundskeeper, and he says, "We're not going to bury your grandmother. Instead, we're going to toss her out in a field, and that's going to serve as her final resting place." Why is it that idea of not treating human remains with the dignity that's deserved, when the soul is not there anymore? Even if you don't
Mm,
believe in a soul, that person doesn't exist, has no breath, no sentience. The idea that you
yeah.
don't treat that with respect is offensive, deeply disturbing. It's because it doesn't matter. That image in and of itself has value, and you
Mhm.
cannot just throw it away. You cannot dispense of it as if it's trash, as if it's just a carcass of a deer. Even deer have value, and that's, all things actually have value if you're really going
Mhm.
to talk about it. But human value is what it is, and you either value it wholly or you allow it to be valued not wholly.
Mhm.
And you allow, and it basically says this: if it isn't to be put into a segmented, a scalable reality, it means that truth existed always. It means that human value has always been measurable. It's measurable today, it's measurable in the future, it's measurable way back when. That means that slavery, that means that rape, that means that all of that sort of concept is, as long as it benefits society in the whole, which slavery, it does have a benefit, holy benefit. And again, one of the abortion debates arguments is that abortion benefits society wholly because it actually reduces demand for welfare state and all these, our prison systems, our school systems. There's a net benefit to society by allowing abortion. That's population control. And so if you allow that concept, you're essentially basically saying if it's okay today, it was okay yesterday, and then you were okay with every form of dignity measurement that's ever existed, as long as it wholly benefits society. If there's a net benefit, it's okay. And actually, there's a lot of, I've written on this a lot over the years, and especially since my daughter has been born, because there is a lot of ethical, and I say ethical very loosely, around net benefited value measurement. So it's this idea that if the death of a disabled child, this is actually from a Princeton ethics professor, again, very loosely, said that the death of a disabled infant means that there could be a birth of a non-disabled infant, and that child's life is a greater chance of happiness, then it's good that the disabled child dies. Because essentially they're around this concept of happiness being derived from your societal output, how you contribute to society as a whole. That's how you measure moral significance. That's how you measure net happiness, which I cannot tell you what it would feel like if my daughter did not have breath in her body. Well, she is, and my oldest, I try to say this in the sense, like, my oldest is so beautiful and sweet, and I don't lessen her contribution to the world, but my youngest, I think it's just because of who she is and what she's overcome, there is just this shining light of joy. And children that I've met that are in the same situation as her, they're so deeply happy. They bring so much joy. And let me tell you, I'm not lessening the impact of the struggle too, because, my daughter stopped breathing 4, 5, 6 times a day for first 2 years of her life. Your child chokes on a chicken nugget once, and it's like, it was terrifying. Like, yeah, that was first 2 years of her life was just, it was a struggle, but I couldn't imagine not fighting to put that breath back in her lungs every single time to ensure that she is still here. If I could go back and change the circumstance of her birth, absolutely. So she didn't have to struggle through that. But let me tell you, my daughter is not disabled. My daughter is I actually look at her comparative to my oldest daughter in the sense of struggle breeds character development. Her first breath on this side of the womb is a testament to that journey of character development that my oldest, I have to falsify. I know that seems kind of weird. I have to create instances of struggle where she can have development in her character, where my youngest, I don't have to do that, because just by every breath, she's striving and pushing through in a way that my oldest is not going to ever really fully understand. And me too. Like, I'm fighting with her, but I just look on her in such awe. Like, that is human strength. That is human resilience. She is powerful. She is important. She has brought so much happiness with her disability or without. This concept of measurable value is, it's a sick thing. It really is.
Well, you were just talking about the World War II, and I've been having kind of this internal debate in my head about just about eugenics in general, and that was a huge early 20th century theme. And then obviously, yeah, World War II, like, oh, that's bad. But my internal struggle here is like, did it ever go away, or was it just kind of not talked about as much? Because it's pretty apparent. Nobody's coming out and just saying, "Yeah, I'm for eugenics," but saying to not treat your daughter, how is that not eugenics?
I know.
That's awful.
it still exists very much. Identity politics is very much rooted in a eugenics argument. It is this idea that value is buildable based upon a criteria set out by culture at the time, right? So our culture is setting those value criteria that looks different than it did in Nazi Germany, right? But it's still the same basic principle. And like I was saying, that, in Uganda, the principle is the same as in America. We're doing the same thing. It's under the same idea that we can measure human value based on a criteria that's set out by that culture in this time now. And it wasn't okay then, it's not okay now. Or it was okay then, and it is okay now. You are either in one camp or the other. And that's why I like to, discuss this in a way that, the organization that I founded, we haven't really talked about that yet, was based off that need of connecting the dots, because we're not connecting the dots very well within these discussions. Again, and that was a struggle. The non-connecting of dots was a struggle for me when I was addressing the issue of abortion and communication side of things, is because I believe that it was a bit short-sighted. And it was, you're addressing too much of the political noise. Like you're always gonna lose at that level. It was just very frustrating. And especially in the abortion area, it's such a politically loud area. We can all agree on that. But if you walked over just to the side, and let's talk about human trafficking. It's a very, very big discussion, very, very big shift in mentality around that discussion, no matter who you're speaking to, whether they're left, right, center, wherever. They're like, yeah, trafficking is bad. We should not do that. Except for the problem is trafficking is not only surviving, it's thriving. I call it like the McDonald's. Everybody swears they're not a part of it, but they're obviously growing, right? And the problem is that human trafficking in and of itself doesn't exist because of trafficking. There's a demand that drives into trafficking. So porn culture, that is a big part. So the very first person that is dehumanized in the process is a man. A man is taught that he is nothing but a set of chemical impulses that need not be controlled. And an outlet is through this is pornography. And he starts to consume, and his mentality shifts from the harmless distance to the physical consumer, which offsets the supply and demand for the willful participants in pornography, the porn industry or sex industry, to the non-willful participants in the sex industry. And so if they don't have enough willful, they'll get many unwillful participants. Those unwillful participants they get them addicted to drugs, and they get them locked into a legal system that prevents them from thriving, and they guilt them into staying, and they're addicted to drugs anyway, so that keeps them there. So drug culture feeds into it. Then when they're impregnated, they're sent to the abortion industry in order to get those sort of symptoms of the consequences of the industry, to have that problem removed. And then, it's more connective than we give it credit for. And because of that idea of the complexity of these interwoven players, to approach it from that foundational precept too, really, we cannot have any evidence of commoditizing of human value. Because if you just get rid of human trafficking or try to address just trafficking in itself, you're always going to have a demand feeding into it, things that are perpetuating it. So I dealt with all these really hard issues. So I just felt God was convicting me, we have to do this differently. We can't do this the same way. Because it's like we have a dam that is bursting, and we're just sticking our fingers in it, just praying to God that it doesn't and it's about to blow. And so instead of just sticking our holes in and waiting for the impending disaster, we have to find the source of the problem itself. And it's really rooted in this idea of human value, changing and shifting our mindset around it culturally.
So for people that are listening, and I'm going to speak for the audience, I think most are probably going to track with you that yes, just going to the ballot box, voting for the right person, while is not inherently a bad thing, it's not. We're not getting to that deeper level, or just having a quick little debate over abortion or human trafficking or whatever it may be. Again, it's not really sufficient. It's not getting to the depths
Yeah.
there. So those that are listening, that are like, okay, yeah, we want to get to the deeper level, but how do I do it? What steps do I take to kind of start changing some minds and being able to have cultural change towards life in that way? What do you
Yeah.
think that they can do?
Yeah. So I want to first sort of address like how we're approaching holistically as an organization and then see how they sort of fit into that.
Mhm.
Because one of the big lessons I always learned in communications, and which we call digital advocacy or advocacy in general, is that not everybody can do all things, right? The point of
Mhm.
entry is sometimes it's you can sign a petition, sometimes it's can share information, sometimes it's you can donate, sometimes it's you can volunteer. Like everybody has their role to play in the
Mhm.
battle at hand. Um, and so, some coming at this from organization, we wanted to be holistic about our approach. So we wanted to have kind of a three-prong area of impact. So we want to educate to change grassroots mindset around human value through the telling of stories, and really like my daughter's story or many others
Mhm.
that have experienced this measurement of their value through culture, and to really start to think outside, like, oh my gosh, actually we are doing that. Sometimes it's just about like that idea, okay, the question, because the questioning is where we begin to change our concepts about uh, a value, right? Because I think we're preaching too much forward and saying, hey, you must believe this. Well, and they're
Mhm.
like, why? And so if you start to think holistically about this idea of human value and educate, we can start to see that and this is a longer term goal.
Mhm.
Education is a long
Mhm.
term. You don't just see that overnight. But also, not only does culture impact policy, policy impacts culture, right? So we do have to look at policy. And so, we're compiling experts that can help with educating, but we're also going into the halls of government to try to be a stopgap for laws like the one I mentioned in Colorado that are allowing for the death of infants up to 28 days after birth. Like, you got to stop that stuff before it goes through,
Mhm.
right? And then also, additionally, organizations. One of the biggest critiques, especially in the abortion arena, is that you don't care enough about the person beyond their birth, which is absolutely one of the biggest lies there is, because
Mhm.
it's not true. Because there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of nonprofits out there that are working on their little corner of the dignity arena, whether it's in human trafficking or abortion, whatever it is. And again, like even in abortion, there's different aspects of like the mother and the child's care, or if your child has disabilities, or there's all these organizations that deeply care. But I've worked with organizations and they're really struggling to do their job well. Sometimes they're not connecting well with other organizations that can help amplify their impact. So we're trying to work with organizations to find the connectivity to
Mhm.
improve how they're operating so they can better serve people. Transform culture while improving how we serve people. So that's what we do organizationally. Um, and you as the individual is really to start thinking on that deeper level. And then, organizationally, we want to share that content that can have that different perspective, but to try to educate yourself. Because again, we're coming at this so politically, we're allowing the political noise to and even from, I would even say from the pro life side, there's a lot of this noise that's not helpful. It's more, it drives away conversation. It doesn't
Mhm.
exactly lend yourself to building those relationships with people that you go, hey, let's ask questions. Let's ask questions about the pro-life side. Let's ask questions about the pro-choice side. And, what do we think about this or that? Or how is the abortion industry commoditizing? Let's ask about that, and ask hard questions, and don't just let your, I wouldn't call it political bias, but the things that like you're most like anchored towards, start putting question marks around it so that those question marks make you stronger in your position. They do not make you weaker. They just don't. And then also to be aware of the public policy process, because what is very, very troublesome to me is that these laws can sneak through, right, unnoticed by groups like ours that would really care to do something about, but don't always have the ear to the ground in all parts of the nation, right? So we have a place on our website that's just a contact us forum. We use that for all things. If you're in Colorado and you see something like that, reach out to an organization, even if it's just not ours, but another policy group that's in your area, and just like, hey, really feed into this, because we need to change culture through the conversations we have and the questions we're asking. But we also need to make sure that our public policy is just. It is protecting life. And I always try to make this point too, that if somebody tries to say that law is not designed to preserve human value, I ask you to look at our traffic laws. So why do we have traffic laws? Well, like order. No, really, it's the idea that you can't just jaywalk and walk out into traffic, because you have value. And other people that you could potentially intercept have value too. It's not just about order. All of our laws, we maintain bodily autonomy in so much as it affects somebody else's bodily autonomy. So our laws should, at its foundation, look at not just the order they create within society, but the value and the impact that our choices make on other people's value. So really thinking like more holistically around that, and our mindset around what law is actually supposed to do. It's actually supposed to protect us. And so we can maintain proper bodily autonomy. So I'm not a fan of that argument. It's such a silly idea, because they're like, what laws dictate men's bodily autonomy? I'm like, every law. Like, you can't take a left turn when it's red. Okay. It's like pretty much everything is supposed to dictate what you can and cannot do with your body, your intellectual output, because if you're doing these things that are affecting someone else in a negative fashion, that should be unlawful, right? So, yeah, it's pretty wild.
I think that's all great information. Your organization sounds like it's doing not just great work. Like I generally will plug for people to be involved if they're supportive of pro-life type of things, of going to your local like crisis pregnancy center and things
Oh
of that
yeah,
nature, which are fantastic. But what I like about what you're describing of your organization is there's not a lot of those going around. Like there's a ton of crisis pregnancy centers, which are great, but like you're saying, there are some that thrive and some that don't. So
yeah,
why aren't they thriving, and how can we help them? I
yeah.
think that's great that you're just the whole basis of your organization is kind of that deeper layer thinking, which is desperately needed in this movement for sure.
Yeah, and I hated this idea. And again, everybody's kind of, I've worked in organizations for a lot of times, like they get their territory, and you feel comfy in your territory, and you don't want anybody to step in your territory. And I think that is a harmful thinking, because sometimes those territories they need to cross so that those other organizations that can actually build you up, and you can build them up. They have strengths that are your weaknesses.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't need to build those parts of yourself up. You just need to do smart partnerships,
Yeah.
get that interconnectivity and the camaraderie around the deep, deep desire for protection of life, right? So I always take heed to the criticism, right? The pro-choice is always going to say, you don't care. Prove them wrong. You care so much that you will go into the places that they are unwilling to go, because you see that person that is hurt in a trafficking situation. You see that woman that is being exploited by the abortion industry. You see that man that is addicted to pornography, that is putting his family in a terrible situation, whatever it is, you care so much that you want to exact change. Prove them wrong. Get up, stand up, do what you need. And we all have our own thing that we're supposed to be doing, right? You don't have to like do everything. Find your thing, care about that thing and the people that are affected by that thing. It's just that simple.
Absolutely. I said this has been wonderful. I could I'm sure we could share stories all day long.
Yeah.
um, for audience members that are listening to you that want to stay plugged into you, follow you on social media, learn more about your organization, how can they be in contact with you?
Sure. Our organization is called Dignity Defense Institute, and it's dignitydefense.org that you can find us. Dignitydefense.com will bring you to a gun manufacturer. That's not us. Though I kind of appreciate that a little bit in the sense of like, yeah. So .org is very important. And we also have our own podcast. It's called Pro Dignity, No Doubt. And it's very oriented towards these really tough stories and tough questions surrounding the different ways that American culture measures our value and the impacts on people's real life. And on our website, pretty much most of the social media is mine at this point. It's at Nicole M.Y. Smith. You'll pretty much on any platform, you'll find me. But you can look on our website. They're on there too. So yeah, that's how you reach us.
Awesome. Well, I have all that included down in the show notes. And again, Nicole, is great having you on. Wonderful stories, wonderful organization, and certainly very, very thankful for you to be on the show and for you to share that with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you to everyone that were listening along with us today. Again, check out all Nicole's stuff down in the show notes, and we'll see you on the next episode.